welcome to the next episode of the Henry Harrison podcast, Entrepreneurs and Finance. We are very fortunate today to have on the show David Asarnow, and he is an exceptional person. We have mutual friends we don't even know about because we're both members of an entrepreneurs organization and we both spend time in Atlanta where he lives. And he has just an incredible background of speaking, coaching currently, plus an AI company currently, plus leading a major division of a company to maximum growth beyond expectations, to starting his own franchise business way back 15 years ago because there's been so much since then. So I'm really looking for, and then a childhood story about how he overcame obstacles. I don't know, this isn't Joe Rogan. We need to normally keep these things to 30 minutes, give or take 40 minutes, but I have a feeling if we wanted to, we could be a Joe Rogan 3 hour with David. Hello, David. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So let's start with where you are right now, because you're doing a number of things right now that we could talk the whole show on. And why don't we start with that?
Right now, a big focus is Business Nitrogen AI. I have two companies, Business Nitrogen and Business Nitrogen AI. And I'm excited about companies being able to leverage artificial intelligence to build, grow, and scale. And one of the things that I realized from all of my years in training, I'm really good at having people take their team and up leveling their talent. And so I've been doing a lot of that lately, and it's fun. It started with me training my team, and now I get to do it for other people and speak at conferences.
So Sababa Global is AI.
Actually, I merged that into Business Nitrogen AI. So I
Oh,
decided to take that. It's like Business Nitrogen branding. I've got the businessnitrogen.com and businessnitrogen.ai. It's really the same thing. It's frameworks. It's understanding all the different bottlenecks that we have in our business and how can we release those through human and artificial intelligence and automation.
and it's interesting. We had someone on our last show that had been on Shark Tank, and he's gotten way into AI. And that's what he's saying. There's a lot of point solutions, he calls them, that are out there with software using AI, but there's less people that are approaching it holistically. What I think I'm hearing from you is how do we take this to your whole organization outside of one point specific solution of software with AI? Am I right on that?
Yeah, in fact, I just spoke at EO the East Coast
That's the
Eccentric
Entrepreneurs
is,
Organization that we're both members of.
yes,
We shortly use it, we abbreviate it to EO for those that don't know, but
yes.
yeah.
So I
Giant
look at
organization where like a third of the country members come. So that's a big event. So to be not every day that you walk in and speak at that event, by the way.
No, I'm blessed that they asked me because they obviously could have hired anyone or asked anyone to come in and speak. But I did. I ran two workshops. And at the funniest thing is I had about 250 people at my first workshop. They moved me to the main stage because we had five workshops and I had over half the people in my room. So they moved me to the main stage for the next event and it became standing room only and they turned people away because they have people at the other events. And I've had an opportunity from a few entrepreneurs that asked me, will I help them A, develop a plan for their company, and B, I train their team. And I just spoke with one of the EO members who's actually out of Charlotte yesterday, and he said it was a debrief from the training event, and they were down in Mexico, and I did it remotely, which wasn't ideal, but I did a 3 hour training remotely for his entire company, and they had people from engineers all the way down to someone who's never used artificial intelligence before. And he said, Dave, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we're in Mexico. The bad news for us, good news for you is you got higher rankings than our outdoor events that we had at our company retreat in Mexico. So he said you were all the buzz, and but here's what you can do. One of the things when you're able to get everyone in a company on the same page, looking at not only how do you use ChatGPT to ask questions, but how do you strategically use it to make yourself better. The way I always look at it is you've got a technology that if it was human is Mensa smart. You've got over 100 and the old version 4.0 was 140 IQ. I don't know if they've measured it today. So when you look at you having the highest level collaboration partner that can ask you questions, that can challenge you, that can get you thinking differently than you've ever thought before, all of a sudden you become better as a human. I often say that people like, what should I do? And I said, you need to embrace artificial intelligence because it's not going away. Is it going to replace jobs? Yes, we know it is already, and it will. However, the people who are going to be the most valuable are the ones who know how to harness the power of it. So I encourage companies to train their team and team members, even if your company's not asking you to, you need to spend the time embracing this and learning how you can become better.
Yeah, that's terrific. And one thing that I've had some good consultants, really good actually, when I had a home building company that had never been a home builder. That was my first entrepreneur business. And they just saw so many home builders, they had a lot of good perspective. But I also have a certain grudging, but you've never been an entrepreneur. So I love the fact that you not only helped entrepreneurs grow massively in certain divisions, which I want to hear about that, but that you also started your own business, a franchise business.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you've done it all. You can never do it all, right? But you've done all the different spectrums from advising, speaking, consulting, helping in the corporate world, which a lot of people are corporate people, right? Probably the majority of the company, to also being a founder, starter, entrepreneur yourself. So maybe compare what it was like to grow the division. Well, you did, I think you did that more than once, but and also what it was to start the franchise company and what it's like to
Well,
go back and meet some of those franchise people now that still remember you.
it's interesting. When I was in corporate America, I was a district manager at first. And I remember bringing the president of the company around to clients, and I was 24 years old. And we were having lunch afterwards, and he said, I've now watched you today. He said, you're not 24 years old. He said, how do you know what you know? And I said, what do you mean? He said, you don't handle yourself like a 24-year-old. In fact, you handle yourself better than the 50-year-olds that are managers in this company. And I said, thank you for the compliment. And I said two things. He said, not only about our company, you know about our competition. You know what makes us different. You had such a relationship with those people. It was just like natural. And you weren't even nervous having me in the room. And the first time you're with me. And I said, two things. One, you're a person just like everyone else, and you're here to grow the company. I'm here to grow the company. My grandfather gave me some advice. I grew up in his business from the time I was 4 years old. And he used to have me in the room when he was having high level meetings. And I didn't realize it, but we would deconstruct the meeting afterwards. What went well? Why did I like that person? Why didn't I? And one of the things my grandfather told me, he said, when you work for a company, and by the way, if someone's not an entrepreneur right now and you're working in a company listening, this is probably the best advice that I have ever gotten. And best advice that I've ever given. My grandfather said this. He said, when you work for someone else, treat that company like it's your own. Make every dollar that you spend, every investment that you make, fight for that company because there's people are going to want what's in their best interest. He said, if you're willing to do whatever's in the company's best interest, not in yours, you'll rise up within that company and you'll get noticed. And I told him that was the advice my grandfather gave. And here's what he said to me. His name is John. May he rest in peace. He said, David, you're going to run this company one day. And I said, thank you. And the first thing I thought in my mind is I said, no, I'm going to run my own company one day. And that's so how did I do that? I did get an opportunity about 5 years in. I was with that company for 10 years. And I was given an opportunity
Great
to go.
success, that company.
Oh yeah,
I
it's
mean,
a big success. But here's an interesting thing. I was given an opportunity to go to a startup company and head up their sales and marketing. And it was a new startup. They were raised some capital, and I was offered stock in the company. And by the way, that company exited 10 years later for $500 million. I accepted it, and then I resigned to my company. And the vice president of sales and marketing and the president said, don't announce it to your customers or internally. We want to talk to you first. I said, I appreciate that, but I've already made a commitment. We know. And they met with me. I was bringing a client up to one of the manufacturing plants. And I said, do you want, because it would be awkward for me to give this tour and then a week later, let them know that I'm leaving. We want you there. You've got the relationship. Just don't say anything. We'll talk to you afterwards. So we did the tour, and I sat down with them, and we don't want to lose you. And I said, I can appreciate that. This company's been awesome. I've just this opportunity. And they said, what would it take to keep you? I'm like, nothing. I've already, he's no. And they started planting seeds. It's a startup and all this other stuff. And they knew what was important to me and my young family at the time. And I looked at them and I said, two things. One, I get an opportunity to, here's what I can earn there. I need that same opportunity. Number one, I have a family. Number two, I want to start a new division for this company. And they just looked at me. I said, in order for me to stay, I want to build something from scratch. I'm getting an opportunity there. I want to show what I can do. And they said, what would that look like? And I said, I want to go after the big billion-dollar companies, custom plastic packaging, et cetera, that we don't do. And they said, we're too small for that. I said, no, we're not too small. I can do it. And they just looked at each other and said, okay, we think we can make that happen. We're going to have to talk to ownership because it's a privately held company about the income. And they said, we'll get together at dinner tonight. And it was just a couple hours later, they said, done deal, everything you want. So I actually had to call this other company and let them know that I wasn't. And the funniest thing they said is, that's exactly why we wanted you, because we knew that's how your company would feel about you. We understand. So it was a good conversation. I ended up reading a book by Jim Collins and Jerry Porras called Built to Last. My sister actually gave me the book. She worked for a management consulting company, and she said, this was mandatory reading for us. And Dave, I think you're going to love it. And I did. I literally was highlighting it, dog-earing, putting like little flags all over the book. And one of the things that book talks about is companies who have built, grown, and scale and outlast have a big, hairy, audacious goal on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Anyway, I had an opportunity to present this new division to the entire company of what we were doing. And I created a whole business plan, a SWOT analysis, everything that you need to do to start thinking about how do you separate yourself from everyone else out there. And I remember asking Mark, I said, hey, Mark, before I present this to the company, can I get your feedback? Do you want to see it? He said, no, I'm really preparing all my presentations. He said, I trust you. I said, Mark, I'm making a whole commitment for this company where we're going. Do you want to review it before I make this proclamation of what we're doing? He had no idea about Big Hair Audacious Goal. He had no idea of anything. He said, really, I don't have time. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yeah, you got this. I said, okay. So I get up in front of the room and I had this book in front of me. I brought it with me and I talked about this company being around for 50 years, doing $68 million in revenue, and yet we are so much better than we're showing up to be. And here's where we can grow to. In fact, I put up Big Hairy Audacious Goal and I said, here's the Big Hairy Audacious Goal for this new division. Here's what we're going to do. I don't remember the exact words. And then I said, and through doing this, in the next 5 years, I'm going to have the largest division in the company. Meanwhile, that means I'm going to have over a $45 million division, right? Or $40 million division. And I said, I'm going to have the largest division of this company. Obviously, I'm going to be growing faster than any other division in order to achieve that. And I'm going to be the most profitable. Meanwhile, the owner in the company has no idea this is going to be presented like this. I see his eyes look over at Mark. Mark looks at him like gets a little bit white. Then he's looking at me with glaring eyes. What the hell are you committing to? And I just looked at him. I smiled and I just kept going because guess what? I'm not going to let anyone throw off. This is what we were going. I had ingrained in my mind what we were going to do. I remember afterwards, by the way, when I talked about Big Hairy Audacious Goal and I talked about what I was going to achieve through that, everyone was laughing. Like literally. The rest of the week, everyone's talking, BHAG, I've got a BHAG. And it was literally became a joke. Mark pulls me into his office afterwards and he wasn't nice. I don't am I allowed to swear, but you'll get an idea. I just won't swear because I don't want it to be banned or whatever. I'll just say, he said, what the F were you doing in there? I said, what do you mean? You asked me to present the vision for what I was going to build. I presented that. He said, but you didn't run this by me. I said, oh, yeah? I gave you an opportunity. You told me you trust me. So either Mark, you trust me or you fire me right now. Which is it? He got like literally one of those things. He looks at me. He said, you better effing do it. I said, don't worry about it. We got it. Here's a funny thing. 6 months in, I was building relationships with the big companies. And because people buy from people. And he says to me, can you close an effing deal? He's, I put my neck on the line for you and you haven't closed anything. So don't worry, by the end of the year, we'll have over $2 million. He said, you better. And we had $2.2 million. Then within 2 years, we were at 22 million, and at 5 years, we were at over $45 million. And we put over $9 million to the company's bottom line that year. So in 5 years, I did what I said I was going to do. Mark actually, I found that afterwards. He really went to bat for me on some things. And I took my grandfather's words to heart. I battled in this company on things that I wanted. In fact, I had an opportunity to bring on a $45 million piece of business alone, over 45 million with McDonald's, but the company for a product, that concept, I came up for McDonald's. And it was a cold call, by the way, that I got in there. And my company said, we can't take that on. We don't have the resources to invest in that kind of manufacturing equipment. I said, so I came up with an idea with McDonald's. They want to implement it. And now someone else is going to be implementing it for us because we don't want to do it. So anyway, I did what I said I was going to do. I started the franchise. In fact, what happened is, this is funny. The franchise company was owned by a private equity, and they were looking for a president and CEO. And the person who actually reached out to me for that other position that I took and then I turned down reached out to me and said, hey, I wanted to reach out. What are you at? What are you doing in the company that you stayed with? And I told him, he said, see, I knew it. I knew you were the right person. He said, friends of mine are on the board of a private equity. They're investors in this franchise company, or this company they want to franchise. They're looking for president and CEO. I was wondering if you'd like to throw your name in the ring. I said, I've never been a president and CEO. He said, yeah, but what you've done in building that is more than a lot of president and CEOs do. So I think you'd be a good fit. Would you like an introduction? So I said, sure. Before I went up to meet with the board of directors, I created a plan of action. And it's funny, the TV show The Apprentice just came out, and friends of mine were trying to say, you should apply to be on that. And I had no interest. And but it was similar to that, except I was on one side of the table and there was 5 members of the private equity firm on the other is an interview. It ended up being a 4-hour interview. And I had prepped ahead of time. I created the exact same thing I did before. I created a plan of action, where they were. I talked about the name. I said, what we really have is a story, but a horrible name. You're not profitable. We can't do something until this company becomes profitable. So first we got to turn it around profitable. But while we're doing that, we got to prep for franchising, because there's a lot of things. I've never done it, but I did a lot of research, and here's what we need to do. And at the end of it, I just looked at him and I said, so guys, when you want to get going? The funny thing is, I knew that one of the guys that they were interviewing, because I heard, actually brought a company public onto the New York Stock Exchange. So my competition was actually steep. And so I felt that I needed to close the deal there in order to do it. So I just looked at them. They said, when do you want to? I said, when are we going to get started? Jose Contreras, who was the head of the private equity, looked at the other guys. They nodded. He looked back at me and he said, when do you want to get started? I said, here's what we're going to do. So once I got yes, then I created the structure of the deal. I said, I don't want to work for you guys as the president and CEO. I said, in fact, because you have a different brand, I think we need to do different things differently. We're going to need to raise capital to franchise, and I don't think you're going to want to put more money in. In fact, here's what I think we need to do. So I already thought this through. And I said, what I think we should do is raise, I think it was about $1.4 million. I'll do it all. When we get to 750,000, I'll resign from my company. I'll give them 90 days notice because they deserve that after what I've built. At the same time, I will do all this on the side, nights, weekends, travel, do whatever I need to do. And you'll get X number of cash for the company. You'll actually own X percent in the new entity. We'll bring on new investors, which will give us the capital to be able to fund the franchise operations and growth. And they just looked at me like, okay. And they literally just said, okay. And we got an attorney to draft up the agreement, and we went out and raised capital. And I think I got to 750,000 in less than 2 months. And I gave notice and we hit the races, and we turned it profitable from a net $350,000 swing of profitability to make it profitable in less than a year. And then gave us, and we rebranded as Clicks Portrait Studios and made the original location a franchise location of the new parent company.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. And some of these, I hear a recurring theme here, that conviction of your beliefs and
Yeah.
confidence and thinking and planning ahead of time. You may be able to say it better than me, but would you say that's some lessons to take home?
I think some lessons are, if you want to do something, you got to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
What I learned, I wasn't always this way. Okay. I was a pretty depressed early teenager that didn't have a lot of confidence. A lot of kids went through this, but parents had a very bad relationship and a very bad divorce when I was in my early teens. And I
Hard.
actually, what's that?
That would be hard.
Yeah, and I was depressed. I didn't feel like I had any friends, although I did. I just was like, I was not in a really good place. And I listened to, I remember going to the mall one day and listening and going into the Walden bookstore. And I was walking through the center aisle. Back then, there were really small bookstores, and you had just an aisle in the center and you had racks on either side. And I remember stopping for a 16-year-old boy to stop at the self-help section. You knew I was in a bad place. And so I was reading through books, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw a rack, and it was cassettes. So now I'm dating myself, but it was a cassette rack. And I remember being drawn to one. It was white and maroon, and it said increasing self-confidence. And I knew that's what I needed. And I bought that. I hid that under my clothes so my dad wouldn't know that I actually didn't want to admit that anything was going on to my parents. And I listened to that. I had a Panasonic tape recorder. The old tape recorders were, after you hit play, when it was done with one side, it would make that real loud popping sound and stop, and then you'd flip it over. And I'd listen to that every night when I went to bed. And when I was done, I'd flip it over and play it again. And I can tell you 30 days later, I was a different person. Now, was I a different person? No, I was the same person, but I started to remember who I was. And from that point on, it was the initial seed of understanding the power of our mind. Whatever we see here and we believe we can achieve, you just got to take massive action towards it.
That's inspiring. And I believe that and do my best to live that every day as well. A lot of people try to get a TED talk. A lot of people try to get connected with a famous person, a big name, maybe one of the biggest ever. Most
Yeah.
people don't turn down one of those opportunities when they come along. So we had a little pre-discussion. So talk about how you turned down one of the biggest names around.
What happened is because of the success I had in franchising, by the way, we grew that franchise company to over 8 figures in 5 years. And in 2008, things weren't going so well. And we were skyrocketing, and I was invited to a CEO panel of other Atlanta CEOs in the franchising space. And they asked me, "How are you doing this?" And I said, "What do you mean? With the economy?" I said, "What's going on with the economy?" I wasn't reading the news. I was literally so focused. And they asked me if I'd be willing to be featured in a magazine as one of the young guns of franchising, along with a few other guys under 40 years old. And I thought that would be so cool. And so we did. Out of that, I got speaking opportunities. One of them was at the Franchise Times conference. There were 750 people in the room, except I never had any formal speaker training. And I got up in front of the room. My laptop was on the podium. I remember the screen was on the other side of the stage, and it was a long room. And I sat there and read my slides. And people were telling me I did great, but I felt like I failed. That's because I remember at 22 years old seeing Tony Robbins on stage, seeing him pounding his chest, seeing him say yes, and getting everyone in the room excited. And I envisioned that one day I would be doing that. And I was the this as that. I was like a college, nothing against a college professor. Have you ever been the college professor who just sits there in front of the room and reads their notes? That's what or high school teacher, maybe, not college professor. But I felt like that. I had some really good college professors, so please, I didn't mean to disparage anyone, especially the college professors that did Socratic teaching. And that's really what I do these days when I run workshops is very interactive, going wherever we need to go to create a result. So what happened is I invested in speaker training. I went to seminar after seminar. I learned how to get up in front of the room. And out of that, when I actually resigned from the franchise company to become a speaker. And I was at a speaker training, and Ted Miller, who we're still friends today, he was the vice president for the Business Breakthroughs International, which was owned by Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes. It was their business growth. You've heard of business mastery. Business mastery stemmed out of that. And Ted was teaching, or they said, we have a special guest, someone from Tony Robbins. And Ted said, has anyone here ever been on one of our workshops? And I raised my hand. And he said, what's your name? And I told him, he said, I remember your company. And he remembered that conversation. Anyway, he talked about we're looking for extra speakers at Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes Company. And if you speak on weekends, you continue to do that. We're looking for speakers during the week that would speak to corporations, entrepreneurs, etc. So Ted comes up to me afterwards and he said, who here would be like to be a speaker? I didn't raise my hand. Ted came up to me and said, why didn't you raise your hand? You'd be perfect. And I said, I appreciate it. I really want to build my own name. I want to do it on my own. He said, come on. He said, you could still build your own name. Just come with us. I said, I appreciate it. I owe it to myself. And 90 days later, I ran into him and Chet at an event called Sang, started by Larry Benet, called Speakers Authors Networking Group. And Chet Holmes and Tony Robbins were partners in that with him. And so Ted remembered me, gave me a hug, introduced me to Chet Holmes, and told Chet about me being on the webinar. We think David should come here, work with us. And Chet's, yeah, you should come speak with us. You should be on our team, be coach or consultant with us. He asked me what I'm doing. I said, I'm doing speaking, coaching, consulting, which I still do today. And I said, I appreciate it, Chet. He said, can I get your email and your number? So I said, sure. Chet emails me a couple days later. He said, David, this is Chet Holmes. Your website sucks. You should come work for us. Seriously. And I replied back, thank you. But what happened is a couple months later, I wasn't getting the speaking gigs I thought I would. So I called up Ted and I said, hey, Ted, is the offer still there? He said, heck yeah. And the rest was history. I wasn't good in the beginning because I had to learn their pitch and how they train and their style of doing it. But within 90 days, I was enrolling more people in coaching and consulting in their programs than anyone else. It's significantly higher. It's a 63.4% increase over the average. And by the way, you asked me that actually created who I am today because I worked with entrepreneurs and I could have from a 200 and something person event to an 8-person room. I was literally hot seated the whole time. I would teach marketing, I would teach sales, I would teach time management, I would teach all these theories, but not only the theories, I'd break it down, but I'd ask everyone, tell me about what you're doing, tell me about your problem. And I would literally have to solve problems in front of everyone else. So I would solve everyone's problems, showing them the value of if they actually implemented this, what is it worth to them, and show them how they can actually implement it going forward with someone guiding them, holding their hand.
I presume because he's somewhat of a celebrity that you got to interact with Anthony Robbins.
No, I didn't. I may have sold millions upon millions of dollars for him, but I never got to interact with him. Chet, I did. I interacted with Chet.
Okay, that's pretty close. And it's the system as well.
In
Um,
fact, it was really cool. It was sad. Chet had cancer and he wasn't able to go to some events, and I was able to fill in for him a few times. In fact, there's a conversation. Chet's like, I wouldn't go to that event. It was a franchise conference. He says franchisees aren't going to invest in coaching, consulting, or programs. And I said, I disagree with you. And like when I challenged, I guess I don't have a problem challenging anyone. And I said, Chet, here's the thing, there's no risk. They're not paying much. And obviously, if I sell anything, you win too. So give me the opportunity. He says, don't waste your time, but if you want to, go ahead. I said, Chet, I was a franchisee. I was a franchisor. I can speak their language. I know the problems that they're having, and I can solve them right there in front of a room of 200 people. And he said, and so anyway, afterwards he laughed when I think out of that event, I sold $65,000 in coaching. So it was pretty good.
Yeah, I'll say. So what was it like giving a TED Talk? That's one of the most famous speaking platforms, venues, I
Can I
suppose.
tell you, that was actually the hardest talk that I ever gave. Two things, I applied for it, and the interview process is nothing like you would think. You have to apply and then you interview. And I did it at Emory University, and I got an email to set up an interview, and it was a college sophomore that was interviewing me. And they asked me questions about what my idea was and what was going to make it unique and different. And afterwards, they said, thank you, Mr. Asarnow, for your time today. We have a lot of people who have applied. If you're selected, we will let you know in the next couple of days. And if not, we encourage you to apply next year. And I'm like, damn, I just got turned down. And I said, thank you. And I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anything 2 days. I didn't hear anything 2 weeks. I thought it was done. I didn't think it was going to happen. I was applying for other TED Talks. And I got an email on January 1st saying, Mr. Sarno, congratulations. We'd like to invite you to be a speaker at our event on February 15th. That was 45 days. I hadn't written a talk. In fact, anything that I do, I never have it memorized. I know what I'm going to talk about, and I flow based upon the energy of the room and where the people are. And a TED Talk is one of those things that lives on the internet forever. You don't get do-overs. And so I hired a TEDx coach to help me architect and structure it. I canceled pretty much every meeting from January 15th until February 15th. And all I did is practice my TED Talk because knew that I needed to give it in a way that came across naturally as a conversation, because that's what TED Talks are. It's a discussion of ideas. And so I did it. And the funny thing is, it was the first time my family ever saw it. I didn't want my family to watch me. So my mom was there, my my kids were there, my wife was there. And some of the stories that I told was the first time that I've ever spoken those live. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to feel the emotion of sharing it, and I knew it would if it was the first time I was ever delivering that stuff in front of anyone.
Wow, that's a very neat approach to that. So here you are. You've got this wonderful history of success, prosperity, abundance, personal growth, helping other companies, helping entrepreneurs, helping big corporate America, helping middle corporate America.
Yeah.
What's on the horizon here? I don't see you stopping anytime soon, but
No, I'm not. Right now, what I'm having a lot of fun doing is I still do growth consulting for companies. It's funny, people see me speak on AI and they'll hire me to do an AI plan. And through that, I can't help but weave in the AI strategy along with the business and marketing strategy and give them growth ideas because that's just ingrained. And so a lot of times people hire me for a combination of just help us grow our company. And I have a PhD who heads up the division, the AI division, and he can build out anything that we come up with. And so what I'm having a lot of fun today is speaking, helping companies implement it. So I'm doing AI keynotes. I was just invited to speak in Brazil to a 500-person event. In fact, they have me doing a main stage and two breakout workshops down there. So I'm having fun speaking, educating. I call it edutainment because we're educating and entertaining all at the same time, having fun helping train companies on core concepts. And someone told you something, it's not the AI tools. The AI tools are going to come and go. What we have to learn is the psychology of communication with artificial intelligence, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok. Manus, perplexity, it doesn't matter. If you can communicate, these skills are transferable to multiple apps. And these are growing so fast that they make the apps irrelevant and it's growing so quickly. So if you become good at the core, you got most of what you need today. So that's what I'm having fun doing. I'm launching out training programs for people who don't have the investment to hire one-on-one that they can do, and I'm getting ready to launch some of those out too. So I'm having fun doing it.
Wow, that's terrific. We had Anthony Franco on. He was on Shark Tank, and he's doing some AI work and coaching and supporting as well. And he had a venture that didn't go well. And he has an interesting take on entrepreneurship, which is may not be for you. Don't necessarily go that path because it can be very challenging. And there was a guy that sold a major, blanking on his name, but a major company to Coke that he created. And he kind of said the same thing. He said, for 5 years, we almost went bankrupt. So there's a new term now. It's not that new actually, but entrepreneur, which is take some of the entrepreneurial concepts, follow your grandfather's advice, although maybe they got it from him. I don't know, which is treat it like your own company because that may be the best place to achieve goals and make a difference and create prosperity because, hey, we need all those things. And you're helping people from all different ranges, it seems to me. So
I was an entrepreneur, okay? And that's not a bad place to be. It really isn't. And before someone steps into entrepreneurship, you have to make payroll. You've got to figure things out. You'll go years many times before you're making the kind of profit. And there's a lot of struggle. Only do it if it's something you really want to do because you'll work more hours and you'll make less per hour typically, at least in the first years, 5 years, sometimes 10 years or more. And all of a sudden you get success. Entrepreneurship, similar mindset. And if you're able to be a great entrepreneur in a corporation or a company, you get noticed and you get opportunities because there's not everyone's like that.
not everyone's like that. No. And so I've got to ask before we wrap up, first of all, if there's something you'd like to wrap up about. But second of all, you've got these, and I didn't ask you before we started, but you got these interesting plaques behind you there, and they must
Yeah.
have some significance or you wouldn't have them there. What are they?
There are two awards one of the softwares that we've used over the years is called ClickFunnels. It's a marketing funnel builder software. And each of these are for marketing funnels that did over $10 million each.
Wow, that's terrific. Uh,
So that's what they are. And yeah, it's one of the tools that we use, but I'm tool agnostic.
it was one of the founders of Body Armor, which was I think, $1 billion sale to Coke, that saying, "Hey, you might be better off in so many words at Coke than if Body Armor failed or if we'd gone bankrupt because it was so close to that." Elon Musk famously almost went bankrupt a few times, and
Yeah.
there's a place for everyone. Even though I have a passion for entrepreneurs, I love entrepreneurship. I love the mindset. I love the mindset of wanting to create, wanting to build, and wanting to achieve big goals, big, audacious, hairy goals, as you
They
said.
carry audacious goals. And no matter what you're doing, do it. And being one good thing about being an employee is you can clock out after hours. You're not working weekends. You may be on vacation internationally. I was just hiking with my son in Nepal and I said, I'm going to be unavailable. Although I got a text message and it just so happened I had internet. I wish I didn't, but I did. And I'm like, what's going on? And there was a fire and I had to put out a fire. And I was literally probably at about 12,000 feet when I put out that fire up on a mountain in a village.
Uh, shall we wrap up on that?
We can wrap up on that.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on. Really terrific. I know people are going to really enjoy this and get a lot of benefit.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.